Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 8th chapter in the book of Psalms. And herein we read of David give a powerful and profound testimony to the Creator's greatness and the qualitative chasm which exists between us and Him. Our finitude is compared to His infinitude, and the chasm between us and Him can only be closed by the superior side. But before we cover that that chapter verse by verse, we just want to briefly read, without commenting as extensively as we will, on the 8th Psalm, Genesis 1:26 through 30, which is informationally foundational to much of what we are going to read in the 8th Psalm. And the 26th verse reads, "And Elohim said, Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over all the creeping creatures that creep on the earth." We're going to save our commentary on the image for the verse which comes after it, but here what's communicated is that man is the superior species, dominant in the food chain. He is not dominant because of physical prowess or strength, but intelligence, and he is made in the image of the Creator. So we were appointed, we didn't evolve to the dominant species. This was from the beginning. It was not the process of millions of years of evolution. Verse 27, "And Elohim created the man in his image, and in the image of Elohim he created them. Male and female he created them." So in the image, we also read in the 26th verse that it is in his likeness. In the image, there's no concrete specifics as to precisely what the image entails, but the most reliable hypothesis I can conjure is that we are unique from the animals in that we have rational and spiritual capacities. Our spirituality renders us capable of contemplating and having fellowship with the divine, which the other created creatures simply lack. So man exists in Trinity. He has a body, as do the plants. A body is able to respond to external stimuli. A soul, the animals have souls too. This gives us an awareness of other creatures around us, and a spirit, which is unique to man, which enables us to, as we already mentioned, have fellowship and contemplation and relationship with divinity. "And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, Bear fruit and increase, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over all creatures moving on the earth." So once more, he commanded the original couple. They're not named yet, but the man and women, male and female, were originally Adam and Eve. We don't meet them till the 2nd chapter, but he tells them to multiply. Now, earlier in the chapter, we read that each species, be it plant or animal life or anything else, is capable of reproducing after its own kind, and he wants humanity to replenish the earth and just fill it across it, subdue it, and he's given dominance and jurisdiction over much of the same species, the categories of animals that we read of in the 26th verse. "And Elohim said, See, I have given you every plant that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruits yield seeds. To you it is for food." So the plants exist for our food and for our pleasure. We are to be resourceful with the resources that he provides us. So stewardship is a moral responsibility which we must be held accountable, and honestly the abuse of which we have abused our environment and our creation is not going to look too well on our collective report cards. Of course, we are judged and held accountable as individuals, but verse 30, "And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to every creeping creature on the earth, which there is the breath of life, every green plant is for food." And it came to be so. It came to be so for the same reason that light came to be and everything else, because Yahweh spoke it. His commandment becomes the reality, and it is a gift to us, and we are to... the breath of life is what we read of. He breathed into Adam's nostrils, created from the dust in Genesis 2:7. So much of that information is going to influence much of what we read of in the 8th Psalm, which is where we're going to turn to now. The opening, it really begins with the title of the psalm, which gives us a lot of information. Not every psalm has a title, but a lot of them do, which identify authors, historical context, or the musical notations or instruments. So in this we read, "To the chief singer on harp, a psalm of David." So this psalms, we read them as poetry and prose, but they were originally compiled as lyrics to musical songs to be sung in liturgical songs and temple worship. And the harp is the specific instrument on which it's to be played. This is a psalm of David, as are 73 of the other psalms of the 150. He's the most prolific writer of the psalms, and 37 of the psalms are arranged into 5 books. The first book has 41 chapters, 37 of which are written by David, or authorship is attributed thereto. So the opening verse reads, "O Yahweh, our Master, how excellent is your name in all the earth. You have made your splendor above the heavens." So Yahweh is his covenantal name, and he is the master of the people of Israel, whom he's had specially related to via special revelation. And his name is, there's no strict speaking separation between his name and his being. His name is indicative of his character, and names in our culture, we almost arbitrarily choose them on a whim according to fancy or what sounds good or what we personal preference. But the names to the Hebrew people were much more than symbolically significant. They represented a function to be fulfilled or a character, and Yahweh translates as "I am that I am." In other words, he is eternal, self-existent one, and because he is eternally self-existent, he created the earth, which he pre-exists at creation, of which we read of in Genesis 1 earlier. And his splendor, his esteem, his majesty is greater than the heavens, because in Genesis 1:1 we read that he created the heavens and the earth, and his name is excellent in the earth, and his splendor and majesty and esteem at all, etc., are greater than the heavens, which are his creation. We read that they are the works of his fingers in some translations. "Out of the mouth of children and infants you have founded strength, because of your adversaries, to put an end to enemy and avenger." So the knowledge of theology and divinity is transmitted from one generation to the next. So it is the parental duty to impart the testimony and witness of divinity to their children, because the sobering fact is that the faith that we now have is never more than one generation away from extinction, yet it has been preserved, at least in some form, at least since Adam. So it is because it has been passed and transmitted. And the adversaries and enemies and avengers are those who seek retribution. Vengeance, it is unbefitting for humans to seek vengeance, as it is an act of faith to forego vengeance and to entrust Yahweh to work out his perfect justice in his own way and in his own time. This demands patience, but it is an act of faith to rely on him to avenge all those who have harmed us and wronged us, and to right all wrongs we have endured. "For I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have established." So it's significant, your heavens. It's not the heavens. It is his. They belong to him. He created it just like he created the earth, and they are the work of his fingers. Now, Yahweh is an immaterial being. He is not a physical creature, so he doesn't have literal fingers, but what we do is anthropomorphize him, using familiar terms to approach the unfamiliar, because he's an invisible being. He spoke, he had a voice which spoke everything to existence. But it's likened to the work of his fingers, even though we read that he spoke everything into existence. And the moon and the stars, which he has established, planetary and outer space objects and entities were worshipped by much of the adjacent civilizations in the ancient Near East. The Hebrew people did not worship creation, but worship the ones who created them. So the practice of astrology is one of the forbidden practices. It puts our destiny and reliability on the patterns of the stars, and that is a forbidden practice. And the moon is worshipped by Muslims. Little known fact that Allah was one of the Arabian polytheistic pantheons. He is the moon god. That is why the moon is the symbol of Islam. So moon worship still is a lot more common than most people think. What is man that you remember him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? So he's asking a question. He's noticing the grandeur and splendor and majesty and might of the heavenly maker who created the heavens and the earth. And on this pale blue dot, which is a fraction of a fraction, an infinitesimal amount of physical space on this this tiny blue dot we reside on, and we are small compared to our planets, which are small compared to our solar system, which are infinitesimal compared to the entire universe. So what is man? Why is he so significant that the most significant being, the one who made them, would remember him? And that is, the answer is, of course, that we are made in the image of him, of which we read of in Genesis 1:26 and 27. And verses 4 through 6 are quoted by the author of Hebrews in the 2nd chapter, verses 6 through 8. So he applies this messianically. So the fulfillment of the redemption did not come from angels, but from a human, the perfect man. And this was promised in Genesis 3:1-15. The Redeemer would be from the seed of the woman, who was both divine and human. And the next verse we read of angels. Yet you have made him a little less than angels, and crowned him with esteem and splendor. So angels are heavenly beings. They are servants of divinity, but they are not made in the image of him, though they are superior in strength, might, and intelligence than us. We are not a little higher than the animals, as evolution suggests. We are slightly less than the angels, who are the heavenly servants. We are to function ideally as earthly servants of him. And angels have moral agency, and they have minds, heart, and will, so they are personages without being human. But he has crowned us with esteem and splendor, and the esteem and splendor comes from him. Remember verse 1, you made your splendor. So our splendor is derivative of him. It is nothing we independently produced, or our esteem. It has been crowned. In other words, it is given to us by the one in whom these supernal attributes are concentrated supernally, and the supernatural being, the one who created the heavens, the earth, man, and angels. You made him rule over the works of your hands. You have put under his feet all sheep and oxen, and also the beast of the field. So this reminds us of what we covered in Genesis 1:26-30. We are given dominion and stewardship. So this is not, the rulership is not absolute or independent. It is delegated to us from him. We are not kings of creation. We are stewards entrusted to manage it at his behest and on his behalf. So Yahweh seldom works without human agents, and we have a task anointed to us to rule over all the sheep and oxen and the beast of the field, et al., etc., the birds of the heavens and the fish of the sea passing through the paths of the sea, we read of in verse 8. So there is no animal that is not under our stewardship's jurisdiction. We are the dominant species, and we are not to abuse or exploit these animals, but we are entitled to eat them, to kill them, and to use them to nourish and sustain us. There is a food chain. It is divinely ordered. It is all part of a supernatural design that the created creatures, there will be a food chain which governs the earth. We carry our sustenance from plant life. We are omnivorous creatures, which means we have our our teeth in the back are the ones that are good for chewing up vegetables and plant life, but our teeth in the front are the ones that give us that chew the meat, that are designed to bite through the flesh of the meat. So all these animals exist. They are our responsibility to attend to, and it is an act of responsibility, and any act of responsibility or any gift that is given to us demands accountability. We are morally responsible for how we treat the creation, which is delegated to us, the rulership of it. It is not ours to give. It's his to give to us, and he did it in a supreme act of grace. And it is an act of faith on his part to entrust imperfect creatures with the management of his earth. And as I mentioned earlier, on our collective report cards, we have failed miserably, or we are failing miserably in our stewardship, but that does not exempt us from observing these standards and being individually responsible, just because the majority of the human species is exploitative and abusive and selfish, and the resources that he provides does not give us license or excuse to mimic the patterns of the collective humanity. And the final verse repeats much of what we begin, the ninth and final verse. Nothing new here. O Yahweh, our master, how excellent is your name in all the earth. So we've already read that and covered that in the first half of verse A. So this psalm ends much in the same way it begins. He is our master, that is his covenantal name, and his name is excellent over all the earth, which he created along with the heavens and the man who he delegated the task of stewardship. And we have a moral responsibility to manage the resources he provides prudently and resourcefully. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.